You are listening to the Telegraph Cycling Podcast, supported by Jaguar. Today, we are in Mulhouse.
Allons enfants de la patrie, le jour de gloire est arrivé.
Played in there by the Marseillaise, tribute to Bastille Day tomorrow and the fact that a Frenchman, Tony Gallopin, will be in yellow jersey. Also tribute to the fact that we are joined tonight on the Telegraph Cycling Podcast, supported by Jaguar, by François Thomazeau, a leading French journalist. Hello, François.
Hi there.
Marseillaise, of course, for most people, their second favourite national anthem after Flower of Scotland. So it's wonderful to hear it. My name's Richard Moore. I'm with Daniel Friebe.
Good afternoon.
And Lionel Birnie.
Hello there.
Where are we, Lionel?
Well, we're in an expo centre, conference centre on the outskirts of Mulhouse. I think if I add up all the expo and conference centres I've seen during my years covering the Tour de France, it's almost as many as I've had hot dinners.
Surely not, Lionel.
No, you're right, absolutely not.
Today, maybe. Hot dinners today.
No hot dinners yet today, actually.
Anyway, enough of that.
You should have tried the sauerkraut. There was excellent sauerkraut in that expo centre. You know,
Is sauerkraut ever excellent, François? I'm not sure it is.
No, it's not. It's not always excellent, but that one was quite good actually. So no, can't complain about the buffets on the tour so far.
Well, we missed it, didn't we, Richard?
We did miss it. It's François, a very proud day for you, I imagine. Tomorrow will be even better. Bastille Day, a Frenchman in yellow. We were thinking it was probably a long time since that happened, but actually it's only 3 years because Thomas Voeckler was in yellow in 2011. But a great day. I mean, what does it mean to be a Frenchman in the yellow jersey on Bastille Day?
Well, I've never personally
Not yet.
held a yellow jersey on Bastille Day, but no, I know that. Well, from what the French riders were saying today, it means a lot. You know, in the break today, there were lots of French teams, and in the past, there's been criticism of French teams not collaborating enough, not working together to get jerseys like the Spaniards do, for instance. And today, you had 5 Europe car guys. They didn't manage to get the stage win, and they said, I don't know if that's right, but they said that they rode, as hard as they could so that Tony Gallopin could take the jersey. So I obviously it means a lot, and it also means a lot because Gallopin is like a cycling dynasty, in France. I mean, the uncle is on the race as the Trek Factory team manager. The father and the other uncle, Joël and Guy, were also professionals. So as Alain Gallopin was saying with tears in his eyes, it's to have a French guy in a yellow jersey is fantastic, but to have a Gallopin in a yellow jersey means a lot, because it's a real cycling family. It means it's rooted, in the tradition of French cycling. So it probably means even more.
And François, I think Tony paid tribute to Laurent Fignon at the finish, and Fignon, of course, I think he took his last ever stage win here in Mulhouse in 1992.
Absolutely, and at the time, his uncle Alain was his soigneur, was Fignon's soigneur. Gallopin, if you read Laurent Fignon's biography before he died, and his ex-wife, his wife's memories as well. You realize what a friend Alain Gallopin was Fignon. They were very, very close. So Fignon was part of the Gallopin family. They were all, a big family. So for Tony, Fignon means something. It's like another uncle, So yeah, obviously there was lots of emotion. To be honest, we've all known Alain Gallopin forever. He's always been around. He's been in teams in Radio Shack. I mean, with some of the guys. He's always been around, and he's always a good source, a good guy to talk to. He knows the sport very well. He's very well respected, but he's always kind of not aloof, but always very composed and everything. And today there were tears in his eyes. He almost cried on the finish line, and it's moving. We're all the cynical hacks, but from time to time to see things like that, it's moving. It was nice.
There's a British connection as well, because Guy Gallopin, Alain's brother, rode the Tour de France for ANC Halfords in 1987, the last British team before Team Sky to ride the Tour. Very similar ANC Halfords and Team Sky, weren't they?
He didn't ride much of it, as I recall. But he rode a bit of it. He might have been paid. I mean, none of the guys that finished the race were paid. I don't know if he got any money.
Didn't Gallopin make it all the way to Paris? I think he may have been one of the four with Timis and Malcolm Elliott and one other. We'll check that.
It was the other Frenchman, I think, who pulled out quite early. But interesting, François, as you say, to see some teams cooperating. Fabien Cancellara also was in that group, of course, a former teammate. He was described on the French TV as a sort of a protege of Cancellara, and he was helping a little bit as well. Also assisted, of course, by the fact that Astana were not chasing with everything they had. It suits them to lose the yellow jersey for a little bit. We wondered, watching it, whether Team Sky or Saxo, Tinkoff Saxo, might be mischievous and actually start chasing it just to keep Nibali in the yellow jersey for a bit longer.
Yeah, well, obviously, from what we saw, nobody really tried to chase that breakaway. It was, cycling has its own rules, and in all the team directors I talked to in the morning, they all said today Nibali will lose the jersey. It was like a pact. Everybody knew it was not a secret, but an unwritten rule of the day that the big stage is tomorrow, Planche de Belfi. Whoever wins it, will take the yellow jersey back in Nibali or Contador. So the day was, the day belonged to the punchers, as we say, to the guys bold enough to go into a break. And in a sense, I mean, Vinokourov said, it's Kazakh humor, I suppose. That was our gift for France. We offered the jersey to France on Bastille Day. I doubt it was exactly as planned as that, but not. Yeah, it sounds, but obviously neither Astana, neither Team Sky, Team Sky without Chris Froome, and they're not a full team anymore. They're chasing on a day like that would have been a waste of time and energy, I guess. So, it suited everybody. That's the best scenario by far.
Would you say, François, that it is ideal, though, in the sense that Gallopin is very, very likely to lose the jersey tomorrow? It's 1 minute 44 seconds, I think, ahead of Nibali. So Nibali might only be able to give the jersey back for one day. It almost would have been better if the bigger group that was between the main peloton and the stage winner Tony Martin had got a bit further up the road, and guys like Machado, the Portuguese rider, could have got a bit closer to Gallopin, and maybe he could have taken it for a few days. So it might only be 24 hours that Nibali is out of the yellow jersey. That's
probably the case. Yeah, I really see Nibali. I can't see Nibali lose so much time on whoever tomorrow on La Planche de Belfi not to claim the yellow jersey back. You're right. It would have been very cunning to try and make sure the gap gets such that a guy like Machado, as you say, they were quite a good, all on. I mean, they were quite a good climbers in that group who could tomorrow be near the front. In the beginning of the race, I asked Vinokourov the question, is it a problem for Vincenzo to have the yellow jersey so early in the race? And he said, not at all, because Vincenzo doesn't feel the pressure. On the contrary, it's a motivation for the team, and he likes to race from the front, and he likes to have the responsibilities to know what he's doing. So if you believe what the Astana people say, it's not a problem for them to have the jersey. They just didn't want to lose energy today. It was not a matter. The jersey was not the main point. The point was today we relax because tomorrow we have a big stage, and if it means losing the jersey, well, let's lose it.
The Telegraph Cycling Podcast, supported by Jaguar, with Richie Porte, Lionel, Birnie, and Daniel Friebe.
Viens vite, il parle de l'autre côté. Viens vite, viens.
So we heard there, that little clip was a young lad at the start this morning in Gerardmer chanting for Alberto Contador as he came off the Tinkoff Saxo bus. We were at the start, I think most of us, certainly Lionel, François, saw you there as well. Daniel, you might have been racing to the finish, were you?
I was wrecking decathlon. There's a very good decathlon here, and the start is back in Mulhouse tomorrow, and I will be paying a visit to the purveyor of sporting goods.
This is an aspect of every Tour de France for you, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bit of a recurring theme, a bit of a cliche of every summer for me. As many decathlon visits as possible on the tour.
Is that because you've lost something or you need something?
That is a part of
pants,
that.
socks.
That is a part of it. But I'm just constantly wowed by the sheer range of sporting goods.
Did you not get your free Vosges socks yesterday, or as Matt White called them, the Vogue Mountains?
I did, but I was hoping to pick up maybe something like a javelin or a discus tomorrow from Decathlon, because that is the kind of thing you could walk in and buy.
It's crazy. Seen from France, everybody wants to get Fred Perry or Ben Sherman shirts, and then new Brits come to France to buy Decathlon stuff. I mean, it's odd enough.
Not as queer as folk. Well, we were at the start, as I mentioned, and there was a strange atmosphere in a way, because it was a very short stage with climbs right at the start. A lot of teams were warming up, which you don't see all that often. It was about 50% of the teams had the turbo trainers out and they were warming up. And as I was walking around the buses, I bumped into Dave Brailsford, who was sort of skulking around, keeping a very low profile, and I kind of met him on the long walk up to see all the other buses at the far end of the strip where they were all parked. And he went, "Hey, you can save me a walk. How many teams? Who's warming up? Can you tell me who's warming up?" He was just sort of spying to try and deduce from that whether some teams might have particular plans for early in the stage. So he was very interested in just which teams were taking that approach and which weren't.
Did you reply truthfully? Or?
I think I replied as truthfully as possible, yes. I mean, Tinkoff Saxo weren't warming up, and they spent an awful long time in the bus, actually, with Bjarne Riis talking to them, which, after quite an aggressive display the day before, you wondered if they had something up their sleeve for this stage.
I wonder whether they did. This is something I need to check with some Danish colleagues, but we talked earlier in the race, it was the stage to Sheffield, how they had adopted a tactic of almost resting 3 or 4 domestiques in the final portion of the stage, and at the time we thought that they were getting dropped. They were actually just taking it easy over the last 40 kilometres, and that may have been the case again today.
Interesting, one thing that Brailsford did say, he was talking about the Saxo performance the day before, and one thing that surprised him was the fact that Mick Rogers and Nicholas Roach were really his last domestiques on the climbs, and they obviously know Mick Rogers very well. They know his capabilities in the mountains. He was surprised to see that those guys were the sort of final support riders for
they lost Hernandez, who was probably a key support for Contador in the climbs. I'm wondering if Brailsford was going around looking for who was warming up, maybe to ask for copyright, because as far as I remember, the first team to do that was Team Sky.
He's on commission. He's on commission. Well, I hung around the Tinkoff Saxo bus for a while, and I got a quick interview with Bjarne Riis, the director sportif, now formerly team owner, now director sportif. It was pretty much as awkward as all interviews with Bjarne Riis are. He doesn't give too much away. You can perhaps hear just how excruciating it is to interview Bjarne Riis in this clip. A lot of teams warming up this morning. It's a short stage and hard from the start, but your guys aren't warming up. Is there a reason for that, or?
No, we'll be ready.
It's not something that you tend to do, a lot of teams
we've
are
done
doing
it sometimes, but we don't feel right now it's necessary today to do that, but if we feel it's necessary, we'll do it.
This is the sort of stage that we could see quite a lot of teams being quite aggressive in the way that we did last year as well. Are you expecting an aggressive stage today?
Yeah, I am. I mean, it's a little bit different today, because to go in the beginning you need the legs, because it's uphill. Yeah, it's a different kind of stage.
And a difficult one to predict as well?
I think it is, yeah.
Very aggressive yesterday, your team on the climbs towards the end. Is that the way you're going to take the race to Nibali now?
I don't think we were that aggressive. We did our race, did our rhythm to stay safe and to put some pressure on. Very aggressive it wasn't, I don't think so, but I think it's the Tour de France. It's important to use the team in the right way, and that's what we try to do.
And Alberto got 3 seconds at the end from Nibali. Was he encouraged by that? There's still quite a big gap between them.
Well, there's still a big gap, but a little bit also have its rights.
We're looking at Nibali. He's been in the yellow jersey for a week now. Can he and his team defend it for 3 weeks? That's a tough thing to do, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's tough. It's ideal for us that he has the jersey, yes, but still he has 2.5 minutes,
And just finally, Alberto, is he back in his best form condition, do you think, and how's his morale at the moment?
Well, we hope so. His morale is good, his condition is good, and we hope that he can keep that.
And you're confident he will?
Yeah, I am.
You're listening to the Telegraph Cycling Podcast, supported by Jaguar.
You can find us on Facebook. If you like us on Facebook, you can win a pair of Oakleys. Not everybody who likes us on Facebook automatically wins a pair of Oakleys, but someone will win a pair of Oakleys. You can also win a phone call from Jonathan Vaughters on the rest day. Francois is looking interested in that. If you tweet hashtag JVCall, if you direct that tweet to @cycling_podcast and explain in your tweet why JV should call you. I can see Francois' brain ticking over.
Well, he probably knows where to find burritos in the town you live, you know.
We have a winner. We're also blogging every day on thecyclingpodcast.com. Friend of the podcast, Ciro Scogna Emilio from Gazzetta dello Sport, has blogged today about Vincenzo Nibali. Some nice little tidbits in there. So we should talk about today's winner, Tony Martin. We're close to the German border here. Germany are playing in the World Cup final tonight, and he was a very impressive victor here in Mulhouse. Tony Martin, 60 kilometres or almost 60 kilometres on his own.
Yeah, well, I was just marvelling at his position on the road bike. I mean, it's immaculate, absolutely immaculate. And it was once he was in that break, once over the last climb and the descent. The group behind took barely anything out of him. It was a proper ruler time trialist performance, wasn't it? I mean,
and they were riding hard behind him.
Yeah, they were certainly towards the end to make sure that Gallopin got the yellow jersey. So, yeah, it was terrific to see that. We remember last year the Vuelta a España where he went on a huge break and got caught just before the line. That was pretty heartbreaking. Was that him?
Yeah,
that was him. Yeah,
it wasn't just someone who looked like him.
No, you looked at me very oddly there, but I'm sure I remembered that correctly. Yeah,
and to me, Martin probably resented the fact that there's only one time trial in this race, so he made sure there were two. You know, that's the only explanation I can find.
It was interesting. Sorry, it was interesting the distance that he set himself when he left Demarchi behind. It was almost as though, the sort of I think it was about 60 kilometres, 55 kilometres. That was a distance that he knew he could ride solo because he'd done it many times before in time trials.
I saw Brian Holm in the car behind him going 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, holding his hand out. Not really. I didn't really see that.
But it makes it St Tony's Day, really, doesn't it? Bastille Day tomorrow. Today is St Tony's Day.
Was Bastille's first name Tony?
No, but Tony Gallopin, Tony Martin. We should christen it St Tony's Day.
Okay, well, I spoke to Rolf Aldag at the finish, another German, and the sports director at Omega Pharma-QuickStep, Tony Martin's team. A little bit, we're close to the German border. It's the 5th German stage win of this tour. 5 out of 9 stages being won by Germans. There are rumours of German TV coming back to the race, perhaps a new German sponsor coming in as well. So I asked Rolf Aldag a little bit about Tony's victory, looking ahead a bit to the World Cup final, which will probably be past by the time most of you listen to this, and about the state of German cycling. Was that a plan today with Tony?
Well, I think that's really difficult to plan it directly that way, but he had the freedom to go, he had the freedom to attack. So, and he said yesterday, I really felt good luck's coming now. I really feel great, so I want to try something before it gets really hot in the south. I like the cold, I like the rain, I prefer that, and obviously it was a stage today. He's loyal enough, and that really makes him such a special bike rider. He has a winning instinct, but he's loyal enough to look after his people. So in the first attack was Jan Bakelands, and then when he was called back and was clear Jan could stay with Kwiatkowski, then Tony took the chance and played high risk. Obviously, was riding 20 seconds ahead of a group of 22 world-class bike riders for an hour and a half or something, and ultimately he brought it home.
And we made that 5 German stage wins in this Tour de France. That's incredible total. There's also rumours of German TV coming back to the race, a new German sponsor. Are you confident that the tide could be turning in Germany back towards cycling?
Towards professional cycling, towards, let's say, the difficult relationship with German media, who kind of decided to boycott the sport for multiple years against all let's say objective steps that cycling took to clean up and everything. So if they come back, they are more than welcome. I mean, Tony's value is really not depending on German media or anything. I mean, he's one of the most respected international athletes. And he personally, I mean, he always looks for young talents and everything, but at the end of the day, it's not in our hands.
Is that a good omen for tonight, do you think?
See, this is a flip side. If Germany, if they win or lose the final, probably in Germany nobody will realize tomorrow what Tony Martin has done today. That's the flip side for us, but it is like it is. I mean,
So you're conflicted then. You want Germany to lose tonight?
No. Even if they lose, we will have no chance. Honestly, if they win, they will. There will be nothing else in the newspaper than German Chancellor Merkel congratulating them. All the people then follow that success. So that's a massive pressure, and we do our thing here. It's the biggest annual sporting event that we participate. That Tony just dictated and dominated today, and I think we drink champagne no matter what Germany is going to do in football this evening. But we cross fingers, of course.
You're listening to the Telegraph Cycling Podcast, supported by Jaguar. Tweet us at cycling_podcast.
So Ralph Aldag mentioned, sort of lamented there the fact that Tony Martin, despite this fantastic victory, which I think Patrick Lefevre described as the greatest performance he'd seen, and he's seen a lot of great performances, he was lamenting the fact that Tony Martin will not get the recognition in the German media that that he deserves. He pointed out that whether Germany win or lose the World Cup, there'll be very little space left for Tony Martin.
So Tony Martin said he's going to try and watch the World Cup. They're playing against Argentina. Max Richesi not in the race, probably the most prominent Argentinian rider.
Yeah, although I did have a chat with Juan Antonio Fletcher today, who's here with Eurosport, and he was born in Argentina. He was quite bullish about Richie Porte's chances. Also got a bit of news from Juan Antonio Fletcher that I'm going to have to keep up my sleeve and reveal in a few days.
Well, we've got an interview with Juan Antonio Fletcher to play in a few days, so perhaps you can break your news then. But just on cycling and the World Cup, 2006 France played Italy in the World Cup final, and Sylvain Calzati, who was born in Lyon, I think, has an Italian father. He had divided loyalties. He won the stage that day, I think, into Lorient. I could be wrong there.
It was somewhere in Brittany, definitely.
Yeah, it was in Brittany, wasn't it? Yeah. So I just remember quite vividly Calzati posing with both the French and the Italian flags for photographs, because that was a big story. And maybe Tony Martin will get on the front page of perhaps L'Équipe if Germany win the World Cup. There might be a little bit of space for him, because it would be a perfect sporting day for them. You're looking doubtful, Richard.
Yeah, I mean, again, and Tony Gallopin will also lose out a little bit. I was quite surprised in a way, L'Équipe today, about the first eight or 10 pages were all World Cup final. I guess, as you said, Lionel, the World Cup final only comes around every 4 years, but you added, but so does a French yellow jersey. François, do you want to challenge him on that?
No, that's a big problem. It's always been in France. I've done a lot of Tour de France, as you know, and so I've seen that situation many times when you have the Olympics or the World Cup clashing with the Tour. Riders resent it a little bit, like the competition between sports, and unfortunately football, won long ago. So, but the result of this is pretty strange. That most riders I know are not great football fans, actually, and then I don't think that there are that many riders that watched. Maybe France, Germany they watched when we were over there, because that's special. It's like France, England in rugby. Even if you don't like rugby, we hate the English so much that you need to be there and be for France. But tonight, really, Argentina, Germany, they're probably the two most hated football nations in France. So I don't think lots of riders will watch that, and they'll probably relax for tomorrow's stage.
Something that the English and the French have in common there, because we're not too keen on the Germans or the Argentinians either.
Absolutely. Daniel, I think you had some news on Jakob Fuglsang. You said last night that he was second overall. He slipped down. Oh no, he's still second overall. Apologies, but he had a tough time on the first day in the Vosges. You said that he had problems with diarrhea. I think you spoke to his doctor today.
Yeah, he'd woken up yesterday with stomach problems. He had trouble with diarrhea throughout the stage and got dropped, I think, on the penultimate climb. Certainly struggled in limited his losses. But I asked the Astana doctor, who's a Belgian chap called Just de Maasna, today to talk a little bit about what had gone wrong with Fuglsang yesterday.
So 2 days ago was nothing. Yesterday morning I saw him. He didn't feel good. He had some diarrhea, had stomach problems. So he felt weak. So we were rather nervous about the race, and he could lose a lot of time. But it was quite okay. He only lost less than 2 minutes. What's the reason? There can be different things. It can be because of food. It can be a viral thing. It can be because of the stress. It can be because of you're tired. There are all different possibilities. So I think it's a bit of a mix of everything. Because yes, we saw yesterday in the evening, getting better. This morning, much better. So almost okay. I don't know how he felt in the race. I still have to see him, but seems to be that he was okay. So let's say it was a bad day. Couldn't some things together. Yeah.
No one else in the team was affected?
No. So that is a little bit against viral things, of course. Okay. But no one else. But we had our problems yesterday because we had injuries. We had a bad knee for Westra. We had a problem with Kankert. So we had actually yesterday 3 guys, important guys, who are not able to help like they should help. Really? But they were fit this morning, so that's the most important thing.
And Kanga's problem yesterday?
He had a crash 2 days ago, and the wrist. So he had a lot of pain and cramps, and because of this contusion, and we went to the X-rays with him, and so it was negative. Yeah, he had quite a lot of pain. Yeah.
And the weather has obviously been a bit of a challenge in this first week of the tour. Cold, wet. What extra precautions are you taking to make sure the riders don't get sick?
We do the usual things. Careful after the race that they don't get cold and extra cold. I mean, a lot of rest. Give them the food they need. Give them the vitamins they need. Do what we have to do.
Podcast daily during the Tour de France. This is a Telegraph cycling podcast, supported by Jaguar.
Here we are then, the Telegraph Cycling Podcast, supported by Jaguar in Mulhouse.
Not bad. Mulhouse.
I was thinking ahead there. I was thinking ahead to my question for you, François, because we're very privileged to have you on our podcast. You first covered the Tour in 1986.
That's
didn't
right.
You?
Mm-hmm.
So this is how many have you?
I've got a question for François straight away.
Go on.
Can you remember the tradition of drinking champagne on the Champs-Élysées, did that exist in 1986?
It did exist in 1986. That doesn't still exist? I think it still exists.
It still exists, but I'm trying to find out when it started.
Oh,
so
when
if
it
any
started.
listeners can help me with that.
Oh, probably a long time ago, because Anquetil used to drink champagne all the time, on every stage. So it's probably a very long tradition. But I might look it up for you somewhere. But it's my guess it's probably been the case since 1903. Champagne being the celebration drink, so...
François, you're a man of many parts. Incidentally, your fantastic English, I believe that owes to some time you spent in Liverpool. Am I correct?
No, I spent some time in Doncaster, of all places. I was very sorry that the Yorkshire, Welcome to Yorkshire, didn't pick Doncaster as a place worthy of a tour stage, but I spent a great time in Doncaster, to be honest. I was a French waiter in a restaurant called Le Longchamp, I think. Le Connaisseur it was called. And since the guys in Doncaster, the only place in France they know is Longchamp because there's a race course, So they put on their menu François, our French waiter from Longchamp. I'm not from Longchamp, I'm from Marseille, but who cares,
Yeah, I bet you were a bit of a novelty though. If any of our listeners in Doncaster can remember a dashing Frenchman waiting, when would that have been?
1981. I'm still supporting the Doncaster Rovers, mind you. Billy Bremner was their coach at the time.
I think I had it in my head that you were in Liverpool because I had it in my head that you had come to Britain on the trail of the Beatles because you're a music sort of fan as well.
Yeah, but I'm not into Merseybeats that much. I'm much more of a mod fan, I like Bradley Wiggins. I mean, I had to explain. I think I was the first Frenchman to write a story about Bradley's, mod culture and all that, because all the guys on French TV would say, Bradley Wiggins is a fan of Oasis or Blur or whatever, and they missed the entire point of what being a mod is. So, I guess a few Brits missed the point as well, but never mind. I'm more into the Jam, the Who, that sort of bands. Who are strictly Londoners.
And you're a musician yourself?
Yes, I played in many bands, I still do from time to time, but I mean, being a cycling journalist, as you know, I could tour with my band, from every tour city.
Why have you never done that?
I'm too old now.
Never.
And I don't have the right stuff to do that anymore,
And you've written over 40 books. You've written over.
That's right.
Sorry, we're going into an area.
That sounded like a confession to something. I don't know.
Hang on, the follow-up question to that.
How's your biological passport looking?
Well, I don't know. It's probably much better now than it used to be, for sure.
And you've written over 40 books, François, as well. In all kind of genres, you've written crime fiction, historical books, sports books, obviously.
Yeah. Gastronomic.
What's your best? If our listener to listen to read one of your books, which one would it be?
If you read in French, I mean, there's plenty, but in English there's only two books that have been translated into English. That one is called The Authentic Bistros of Paris. So it's a bestseller of sorts, you know. It
certainly will be now.
And the other one is The Brasseries of Paris. So you see, I'm a sort of an expert on the places where you can eat and drink well. So otherwise, I don't know we're on the tour. The latest I published is called Carnet du Tour, and it's a little guide actually to the tour followers about not only the cycling, but in every city we go through monuments, churches, little sites you want to see, little restaurants where you can stop, and so it's like a Tour de France handbook, and there's even empty pages. The publisher was very happy because it's less ink on the book, but it's and with a little pen, and you can hand it over to the riders to sign. So it's a nice little book. It's cheap, under €10. So that's one you can buy, and that's about it. I didn't write that much about cycling actually in terms of books. I don't know why actually.
Not yet. Well, François, I mean. A lot of people, especially people who've covered the race for a long time, say it's not like it was better in the old days. What are your thoughts? Do you still enjoy coming to the Tour? Do you look back on those early days when you would have been reporting on Le Mans, Fignon-Hinault, with sort of rose-tinted spectacles or rosé-tinted spectacles?
I don't know. I always, I think nostalgia is just you're not nostalgic of something real. You're just not nostalgic of your younger days, So, well, obviously I was younger in 1986 than I'm now. Maybe the stature of some champions I came across during my career was big. I mean, you have larger than life characters in cycling. That there are still a couple, but it's more. I think it's more leveled now. I mean, you don't have the real. I mean, some of the riders at the time, at the end of in the late 80s, were hardly professionals. They made very little money, and there was still a little bit of the old amateur spirit of cycling that's gone completely. But in the same time, nobody really stands out. I can't tell that Vincenzo Nibali is a superstar, and he probably will never be. Hinault or Le Mans or these guys, well, even Armstrong in some ways were larger than life characters, and maybe that's what's missing a little bit. Alberto Contador is a great champion, probably one of the greatest riders of all times, I think. But even though I like the character, he's a nice guy. He's always available. He doesn't have the charisma that you found in the old days. And when I started, the old guys from the 50s and 60s would tell you how much better. I guess probably the everything changed. I guess everything changed in 1986 when I started, actually. That's when Bernard Tapie came. You know all about it, Richie. You wrote a book about it, But in 1986, money started pouring into the sport, and then you had Greg LeMond winning the Tour, and then an American. So I think that's really. I started to cover cycling when it changed from. All the exoticism, the tradition of the sport died probably that year. So to me, that didn't change that much actually. No, not really. And pleasure is still there. Otherwise, I'd be elsewhere on the beach.
I should point out that with Giro likes being on the beach as well. I should point out that François features in the film of Slaying the Badger, which is the film of my book, and it is being broadcast by ESPN on July 22nd, and maybe broadcast in the UK as well, being cinemas and so on. But you feature quite prominently in that. You were the Bernard Hinault's translator in the film. So.
Interviews and analysis. We've got the Tour de France covered. This is a Telegraph cycling podcast supported by Jaguar.
Daniel, anything else to add on today's stage? Looking ahead tomorrow to third and final day in the Vosges. Have you got any information on tomorrow's climbs that you want to share with people?
No, I'd like to ask you if you remember which ballon we're going over tomorrow. After a thorough briefing yesterday, you're holding your head in your hands.
Le Petit Ballon.
Yeah, and how many times has the Petit Ballon featured in Tours de France?
This is its debut, Daniel.
It is its world premiere.
Dave Brailsford actually made a point. You were talking there, François, about the charisma of the cyclist, but the sort of image of the race tomorrow is one of those days which has the potential to become a kind of modern icon, because if you remember 2 years ago, the finish line shot with the camera on the big whatever it would be, what is that thing? It's a big gantry, isn't it? And they constructed the shot so that it was Chris Froome who won the stage. He kind of almost rose up, and you saw him kind of elevate up, and Dave Brailsford described it as an apparition. And certainly this year, as every year, last year was particularly memorable in terms of the sort of cinematography of the Tour.
Sure.
That's something that's always very important, isn't it?
And the thing that's important as well is that we must realize the Tour did something to the geography of France. The Galibier, Tourmalet, all those, now they're household names. Everybody knows outside of France, the Tourmalet, Galibier, all those mountains. They would not exist. I mean, they would be absolutely unknown even to the French people if the Tour de France had not gone, up those mountains. So nobody knew of La Planche de Belleville 3 years ago, and now this place is well known. And I mean, the local authorities, they know exactly what they do. They're trying to develop skiing there to make it, not a fashionable resort, but at least a well-known resort. And the fact that you have mythical Tour finishes up there, well, it is also very important for the region's economy. And so this legendary status that mountains acquire from the Tour is also an important fixture of the Tour that we tend to overlook.
The Planche de Belleville obviously also a very controversial finish, wasn't it, 2 years ago, and the environmental impact was quite considerable. There was resurfacing that took place. In fact, the road was kind of, the last kilometre or so of the road was built completely new, and there were protests or threats of protests, all sorts of campaigns. We saw a similar thing last year with the Col de Sarenne, didn't we? But that stage went ahead with no disruption.
Yeah. Well, that's usually the case the first time over, but I didn't hear of any protest this time. So I guess that it's the Tour is always. It's funny because one day I was talking to Charlie Motet. Charlie was a good mountaineer and lives in the mountains, and he was telling me that as a rider, because he likes the mountains, he likes riding a mountain pass, he was always extremely happy when he was riding a new mountain pass he didn't know. He said it made me feel, he said, like an explorer, and so that's another dimension. The Tour riders are explorers in a way. Every time they ride a new mountain, they have the impression they've conquered it like alpinists or climbers do. So there's that dimension as well as far as La Planche de Belleville is concerned, and I guess that. You'll always have this sort of controversies, in the mountains but to be honest, I'm myself, very concerned about environment, but bikes, as far as I can tell, do far less of harm to the mountains than trains or cars or. I think the impact is probably not as important as we might think.
We should probably wrap up this podcast, but Lionel, you spoke this morning at the start to Richie Porte. I mentioned earlier that we bumped into Dave Brailsford, and we were wondering whether Team Sky had a plan. There was a sort of rumour going around that Team Sky had some kind of battle plan today, but I think you felt that tomorrow the La Planche de Belleville is better suited for Richie Porte and Team Sky, who obviously know that climb very well.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, Richie is now the outright leader of Team Sky. It wasn't the position he was expecting himself to be in. He was here to work for Chris Froome, and I think a lot of people, perhaps people who had tuned into the Tour de France to watch Chris Froome, will be wondering who Richie Porte is, I suppose. And so just give a little bit of background. A lot of the Australian riders on the race have come through the Australian Institute of Sport, which is a similar kind of setup to British cycling, I suppose. But Richie Porte has come a completely different route into the sport. He's from Tasmania, and he was initially a triathlete as a teenager, a very good triathlete, elite level. But he was very good on the bike, very good at swimming, but because he's quite a short guy, he had quite a short stride, so that kind of held him back. And he was kind of discovered as a cyclist by an entrepreneur called Andrew Christie Johnston, who founded a jacket potato takeaway restaurant chain. So it's kind of like Spud-You-Like, but in Tasmania. If you remember, I'm sure you remember Spud-You-Like in your student days, Richard. And this team, the Praties team, developed a lot of Tasmanian talent, and Richie Porte impressed, and he broke Cadel Evans's record on Mount Wellington, which is quite a well-known climb in Tasmania. And then he went on his own, really, to Italy with a bit of help from Andrew Christie Johnson's contacts. Won a stage of the Giro Bio, the Giro d'Italia for young riders. Got spotted at Daniel by Andrea Taffi, and then ended up at turning professional for CSC. So, he kind of came into the sport a completely different route to a lot of the Australians. And when he was at CSC, they nicknamed him the Lung because he did a swimming test where they had to dive into the swimming pool and swim underwater for as long as possible on one breath, and he did something like 75 metres. So he's obviously got...
Did they not need both lungs for that?
Well, yeah, maybe they call him the Lungs, I don't know, but one lung, two lung. So that is Richie Porte. He's now leading the team, and I had a bit of a chat with him this morning, not just about how his day, the first day in the Vosges went, which he said didn't really suit him because of the steepness of the climbs, but also how mentally he's adjusted to now becoming the team leader. Richie, you said yesterday that the stage wasn't your perfect bread and butter, your cup of tea, so you must be pretty happy with the result and moving up to third.
For sure, I'm happy with how yesterday went. We're taking it one day at a time, so certainly I'm looking forward to the stage tomorrow, the Punch to Belfield, but we're not getting too far ahead. Everything's good for the moment, but day by day.
Is that because the longer climbs allow you to get more into your rhythm?
Yeah, I'd say so, but yesterday just behind Nibali and Contador, that's a good place to be to start with, so I'm happy with where I am at the moment.
How do you assess Nibali and Contador and their climbing? Who looks the stronger of the two at the moment, and where are you in relation to them?
I don't really know. Yesterday was such a short climb, but it was also a hard climb, but I think we'll find out more tomorrow, a little bit longer climb, and I think Vincenzo's in a great position at the moment.
With the first it wasn't really a major mountain stage, more of a moyenne mountain stage, it gives the tour a slightly different rhythm to not have that first rendezvous in the mountains. Is that how you see it?
I remember a couple of years back, the Planche de Belfield was the first mountain stage, and that's a hard one to start with, so I think we've had enough of these transition stages to start with. They're stressful, and a day like today also can we were first and second this time last year on GC, and then we know what happened, but let's just take it one stage at a time, and certainly those longer mountain stages are going to be where the race has turned up. And
mentally, how easy is it to shift from your previous role, which would have been to support Chris Froome, to now assuming the leadership of the team?
Yeah, it's a little bit more pressure, but it's a great opportunity for me, and I look forward to making the most of it. It's not ideal for any team to lose guys, or even guys crashing. That takes a lot out of you. But we've lost our leader, so that's a big blow. But Saxo lost Jesus Hernandez, but I think Astana are doing a great job in controlling. It's tiring. We know that as a team, but I think today is going to be hard for them.
So that was Richie Porte. We're looking ahead to a final day in the Vosges Mountains. A Frenchman in the yellow jersey on Bastille Day. François and his colleagues will be, I'm sure, drinking champagne tomorrow. How do you celebrate Bastille Day?
Usually you just fire crackers and stuff, and
not sitting next to you in the press room.
Yeah, but and in the area, the area is famous because young guys here, they fire crackers, but usually they don't throw them; they keep them in their hands and get seriously hurt. Yeah.
I hope we get out if you're alive. Well, François, thank you very much for joining the podcast. I hope you might be able to join us again before the end of the tour.
Hope so.
Lionel, thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
And Daniel, thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
The Telegraph Cycling Podcast, supported by Jaguar. Subscribe on iTunes, listen on Audiobook, and visit us at thecyclingpodcast.com.